Hey YouTube, welcome back to my channel. So this video today is called expectations, and I debated calling it adjusting your expectations, but I thought expectations is a big topic and I want to talk about the whole thing as it pertains to psychiatric drug withdrawal and adverse reactions. So before I get into the video, I want to say I am offering one-on-one coaching. I have a free 15-minute consultation, 30-minute calls, 60-minute calls, and I offer those at lower rates than other places online. And I've also put together 4-session packages for those who might want to meet a little bit more regularly, and I've offered those at a further discounted rate. I will put the link to my online booking calendar in the description of this video. And I will also list my website link if you want to check out more about my story. I have my bio on there. You can also book sessions through there. And I have filmed longer form videos telling my whole psychiatric drug withdrawal journey and my reinstatement story. So I initially had withdrawal from SSRIs, 7 years of use. And then after 2.5 years off, I reinstated and took several more SSRIs, antipsychotics, benzodiazepines, and anticonvulsants, beta blockers. I took a bunch of different drugs and had several adverse reactions and then a subsequent withdrawal off 3 months of Ativan use. So you can check out the whole detail in other videos that I have on this channel. So this video is about expectations. And before, or even to start off this video, I want to talk about something that I saw in one of the groups recently. I think it was yesterday. So I have not been in any of the groups for a long time, but there was something that I was searching specifically for. Oh, I know what it was. Actually, I'm not even going to say it on this video because it's probably triggering, but I was looking for a specific piece of information. And so I went on one of the groups and so I started scrolling. And so even me, I'm still vulnerable to that, and I'm not even feeling like I have this problem anymore, but I was still searching. I was just like, I wonder if the same people are still in these groups. I wonder what they're posting about. And someone had made a comment under one of the posts, and I was reading through the comments, and they were talking about coaches and listing several people's names. I was not on there, but the well-known coaches in this community were on there. And the people that were commenting under that were talking about how, coaches are only in it for the money, and they're giving people, they're lying to people, and they're exaggerating their stories, and they're just trying to make a quick buck. And I just want to say to that, how incredibly offensive to someone who does this. Coaching is incredibly difficult work. I mean, not only did we have, in my case, I had a 4.5-year story, a 4.5-year journey that was the most grueling experience of my life, the most life-altering, traumatic, pivotal experience of my life. And then I chose to come back when I felt better, when I could have just exited this community and been like, to hell with you all, because I felt so grateful and relieved to feel better that I was like, I have to spread this hope, because it took all the hope and all the support that I could find to get me through my own journey. And for people to be commenting that is incredibly offensive and incredibly inaccurate. I mean, first of all, we can't work for free. Nobody can work for free. We've decided to do this as a career, and it's not easy work. And I offer my coaching at much lower rates, and they weren't even, I guess they were talking about how, they're trying to make a quick buck, and that is not it at all. I mean, we all went through really horrible experiences. I can't speak to all the other coaches personally. Like, I don't know all of their stories in detail. I don't know what they experienced subjectively, so I don't know. But my own experience was so incredibly bad. I don't know how I made it, and I chose to come back to try to help others through this. So it is, yeah, it's horrible. I feel like that people are even saying that, and it goes back to what I talk about so much on this channel, which is get off the damn groups. I'm telling you, as someone who feels eons better, it still is hard for me to go in the groups, because now that I'm on the other side of it, I see so much misinformation. I see so much, I call it a suffering competition, and just people saying the most hurtful things on there and scaring the absolute crap out of everybody in this community. And this ties into expectation, which is what this video is about. So again, as someone who's on the other side, I still have a difficult time doing anything in any of those groups because, again, there's so much fear mongering, there's so much misinformation, there's so much of this. I don't even know how to describe it. I saw too where someone is early on in their journey and was saying one thing when they were feeling well, like, you guys can do this. And this is a very frequent poster, from what I gathered. And it was saying, this person was saying, like, keep going. There's so much hope for this. Like, and then a couple of days later, obviously when this person was in a wave or not feeling well, was talking, how do I say this? I don't want to be triggering and I don't want this to get flagged, but not encouraging people, but I would say talking about exit plans in a way that is incredibly triggering and I don't think useful in the groups. Like, or at least if you're in a position where you're flipping that much, I don't think you should be posting in the groups. And I really believe that people who are really early on in their journey, I mean, they're all over the place. And I have empathy for people. I understand where they're coming from, but you have to be careful with the information you're putting into your mind from these groups because it's incredibly harmful a lot of the time. And again, even someone who's not even typically triggered by stuff. I mean, I have conversations every day with people who are injured and in the early stages from these drugs. And for me to go on these groups and see certain things, I'm just like, wow, like, just get out of them, please. If that's the only thing you do, please get out of those groups. So this is about expectations. And what I mean by that is, well, there's several different things. So one of the most difficult things in this journey that I experienced myself and that people report to me all the time is the up and down nonlinear journey and the way that it goes for people feeling well and then crashing again. And then, so it can set up these expectations. And so when people are feeling good, they will, some people, not all the time, but there's this fear at least that when is the next wave going to come? How long is it going to last before I crash again? And it's understandable to feel that way. I mean, when something feels so unpredictable and so up and down, it's natural to kind of fear that. But at the same time, if you're going into the groups or reading information that will scare the absolute crap out of you when you're in a wave, then it can set up these negative expectations. And I hear this from people and I can see how it's detrimental because, again, that's when people will say, I'm reading all these YouTube comments, I'm going in the Facebook groups, I'm going on the forums, and they're setting themselves up for these horrible, horrible expectations. Like, I'll hear things in my calls or in my conversations with people saying, I'm never going to be able to take a supplement again. Did you see this person took a Tylenol or had a drink and was set back for this long? That's what's going to happen to me. And I think that type of sort of expectation is almost sometimes as harmful as the symptoms themselves, because I've also talked to people who have either had a family member experience benzo withdrawal or some type of drug injury or withdrawal from any psych drug and had no knowledge of sort of the trajectory of this and what can potentially happen and for how long. And so they had no information, no prior information. Either a family member of someone I talked to or the person themselves will have had a previous withdrawal experience with no knowledge about it. And they found it much, much easier to cope with it than now if they're having a subsequent problem for whatever reason. Maybe it was just a drug they had after surgery or whatever. And now they have all of this knowledge somehow, like, again, it's all different types of situations, but they'll have gained some type of knowledge about this community and went down all of the rabbit holes. And then once they acquire all of this knowledge, and I'm not talking knowledge in a good way, I'm talking about all of the horror stories, what might happen, what can happen, and then they have a much worse experience the second time around because they just have this rumination over and over and over. Well, what happened to this person? Where did they go? Did you hear about this? And this person had this symptom for decades, and this, person was set back for 8 months because of, I don't know, a PPI, a proton and pump inhibitor, or something relatively benign. And people just get so caught up in those expectations. Like, and there's the nocebo effect. I've talked about this in other videos where the placebo effect, which more people are familiar with, you have an expectation of a positive result. So they think that a lot of ways that antidepressants work is because of the placebo effect. People think that it's going to help them, and that expectation makes it so, and they do have a positive experience. But on the flip side, there's the nocebo effect, where when you have all of this negative information, it can cause you to have a negative reaction because of what you know. So my aunt is a nurse, and I just had a conversation with her about this a couple of nights ago. She actually is a retired nurse, but she was saying how it's almost worse when patients know side effects, because then they're much more likely to experience them. And I've read this in a medical study where when people know all of the potential effects of a treatment, they will experience those effects much more commonly than people who have no knowledge. And I'm not saying that you should be naive and ignorant to everything, because obviously that's what got a lot of us into this in the first place. We weren't given proper informed consent. We weren't reading the leaflets. We had no knowledge that these types of reactions can happen from psych drugs, or these type of withdrawals can happen. And so that's why we're in this mess. So I always try to stay middle ground, where you don't want to be naive and totally blind to things, but you don't want to end up acquiring so much knowledge that you become A, afraid of everything, or B, that it sets up these expectations. Because again, I've just heard people have so much despair. I just saw a comment, I don't even remember what, it might have been in that group or on a video or something, where someone said, I just read this about this, and now I'm completely freaking out. And they weren't even talking about their sort of normal symptoms. Now the fear was just taking over, which was then exacerbating their current psychiatric drug symptoms. So I think, like, again, expectations, I mean, they can be positive as well. If you have a positive expectation, that can garner you a lot of hope. But it just, in this community, I see it so much more on the other side, where you have these constant expectations of waves, reactions upon reactions, food reactions, chemical reactions, and that can be incredibly harmful. And there have been stories of people who have completely exited these communities, whether they're already recovered or not, and that has made such a difference in how they feel and their rate of recovery. And again, like, I just want to reiterate, me as someone who is on the other side of all of this suffering, going into those groups, it's just, when I read it objectively now, and I'm not immersed in the stress of the withdrawal experience, I'm like, this is incredibly toxic. And it just contributes to so much despair. And I heard one of the other coaches say to someone once, or I have knowledge that they said to someone once, stay in your own experience. And I think that's a really powerful statement, because, the overwhelming majority of people recover. And people were getting upset in this group about the statement, everyone heals. And then there was all these negative comments. And I would say the majority of people recover, and the people who don't, you don't know if there's confounding factors. You don't know if there was something else going on. What you read on forums and groups is just one part of the story. Unless you're reading every single one of that person's thread, unless you're speaking one-on-one to that person, you just don't know what could possibly be going on. I've seen it before where people are posting, yeah, I've been off the drug for 5 years and I'm no better, but then I've had private conversations with them and they're doing all kinds of things that are well known to exacerbate this condition. And I'm not trying to patient blame, and I'm not saying that that's the case all of the time, but I'm just saying, take what you read with a grain of salt, because if you are on the forums at all, which I don't think you should be, but if you are coming across stories or whatever, don't take it at complete face value, or do I say take it at face value? Again, I'm bad with these words sometimes, but just know that it's not always the complete picture. And just assume, rather than assuming, I know it's easy to assume the worst when you're reading something on the group, but flip it around and be like, assume that we don't know the entire story. And maybe there isn't a lot more to it, but maybe there is. And that can happen for sure. I've seen it happen. And so try to adjust those expectations. I've had coaching clients who have had their medication mixed up and they've ended up either skipping several doses or doubling up on a dose, and they have no idea. So they're essentially kind of blind to it. And then once they have the knowledge of what happened, then they freak out. They're like, oh my goodness, it's going to take me months to stabilize now. And it's always just this horrifically negative thing. And again, I get it. Like, your brain isn't functioning properly. You're in a chronic stress response. I get it. Like, I'm not trying to blame you. I'm just saying that that expectation and that fear almost always comes from, well, I know this happened to this person, and I know this happened to that person, and I saw this YouTube comment that this person had a setback for however long because they did the same thing as I just did, and oh my, and it's always like it's hard because it's hard to have conversations one-on-one with people about their own experience, because a lot of people are coming into these calls with so much information, more than I think is beneficial at all. And so we're always having to like pull apart, and I'm always trying to challenge them and in the way that they're thinking about that. And it can be like your worst enemy. In fact, the DNRS program, so the Dynamic Neural Retraining System, it's a very, very popular limbic retraining program, and people talk about it in this community. I have purchased the program and went through the majority of it. And when they do the interviews with people who have had success with this, and these are people who have long COVID and people who have electric sensitivity syndrome and who have multiple chemical sensitivities, whether it's drug induced or not, they all say like they have so much knowledge, they could write a book about their condition. And one of the things that DNRS promotes is coming at it with a beginner's mindset. And I think that's really important. And again, expectation, like I know it's impossible to forget everything that you know and everything that you've read, but if you can try to take somewhat of an approach, like, I'm going to come at this from now on with a beginner's mindset, like, I think it's one of the things that they really encourage you to do when you do this limbic retraining. And again, the people who have the success stories, who have the video testimonials in the DNRS program, the way that they talk, they just sound like doctors. And I find a lot of my clients are the same way. Like, they have an incredible knowledge about psychiatric drugs, and I mean, not always, but a lot of times, and just every possible scenario. And again, it's just setting up these expectations that can really lead to a lot of despair. And again, my intent is never to downplay what people are experiencing. I know how horrific it is, but I also know how easy you can spiral by listening to the horror stories and by gathering more information than you really need. Because I've said before in videos, the forums and groups are incredible because a lot of times you're just floundering and you have no idea why you're experiencing the symptoms you're experiencing. That was what happened to me. And so you're just frantically Googling, what is happening to me? And then you come across these groups and you're like, oh my goodness, this makes so much sense now. And at that point, like, once you have a basic knowledge, like, here's what happened to me, here's the general sort of consensus. I think Surviving Antidepressants has sort of this start here type of thing. I forget what they call it, where they give they break down sort of the major components of this. And I think once you have that knowledge, it's best to just leave it there, because once you get into the nitty gritty and you start going down all of the rabbit holes, I think it actually does more harm than good. So trying to adjust your expectations, try to adopt a beginner's mindset, which people are probably maybe scoffing at, but honestly, like, I think it's really powerful to just pull yourself away from all of that information and just try to be a little bit more neutral about things. So, like, again, I think because of the state of our nervous systems, we are highly, highly suggestible. And I think that nocebo effect is happening all of the time in this community. This person had a reaction to bacon, and now suddenly I'm having increased symptoms after bacon. Like, it sounds crazy, but I've read those types of stories before, back when I was really heavily involved in the communities. And, I think it's important to tell yourself, like, that was that person's experience, but that might not be my experience. Because again, the overwhelming majority of people get well. And if we're going to just focus on the one who's really struggling and it's really, really long. And another thing too is people their expectations of, are, well, I'm going to end up protracted. Like I'll have people who say this to me, well, I think I did a proper taper, but now I heard from this person that they still ended up protracted. And again, that's that expectation. I mean, I've seen people do every kind of taper, no tapers at all, and the length of time it's individual. There's a lot of things that go into that. It could be genetics. It could be, what are you doing in the meantime? I mean, in my first withdrawal, I was still drinking alcohol and doing all kinds of things I know were not helpful, but I wasn't informed enough to know any better and to know not to do those things. And so my journey was probably longer than it needed to be, but I didn't have a lot of knowledge yet at that point in my first withdrawal. And again, like everybody's experience is different. You just don't know what they're doing in the meantime. You just don't know, like a lot of times you don't know their entire drug history. Sometimes you do. And that's not always relevant. Like people will say to me, I'm too old, I'm not going to recover. I was on the drugs too long, I'm not going to recover. I cold turkeyed, I'm not going to recover. And I just don't think that that's, like, if it was that black and white, everybody, like people wouldn't be scrambling to find answers over and over and just like immersing themselves in these groups just all day long. It's so individual, and that's why you need to stay in your own experience, because I have seen all types of recoveries no matter what the situation was, and you're just not getting a lot of times the whole story when you're reading something in a group. So that's what I want to say. Try to keep your expectations neutral and pull yourself out of the groups, and don't assume this person had an 8-month setback from one sip of wine, or this person had a 2-year setback from cleaning their floors with bleach, or whatever it might be. That's hypothetical, but like, you have no idea that that's going to be the same thing for you. And just be mindful of that nocebo effect. Hearing something and expecting a negative outcome is very powerful. There's been studies on that. So stay in your own experience. Try to be neutral in your expectations and get off the groups, please. So I don't know if this is helpful or not. I hope so. I just needed to speak on it because it's been on my mind lately. I do think I'm going to still do a live Q&A on YouTube. I've never done a Q&A, or sorry, not a Q&A. I've never done a live on YouTube before, but I had an overwhelmingly positive response when I asked in the community whether I should do one, and most people said yes. So I'm not sure when. I'm thinking I'm going to do it in the next week or two, but I will definitely give you guys a heads up, and I'll just have it set up so there won't be really a topic. I'll just let you guys know ahead of time when I'm going to be hopping on. I'll hop on. You can just ask me questions and I'll answer as best I can live. So yeah, hopefully that was helpful. I hope everyone's doing well. And if you celebrate Easter, happy Easter, everyone. And I'll see you next time. Bye.